All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, my IU. Thank you for coming. As you can see, we have a very special guest today, Deb Voisin, who's a movement coach who I know well. And we're going to talk about the role of movement in your overall healing journey, how it affected me and my health and is continuing to affect me and my health. And just get into some topics around not only movement, but the sacredness of movement and how we can kind of incorporate it into, your overall daily ritual. And welcome, Deb.
Thank you, Mark. I love the word ritual. Yeah, our daily ritual, the sacredness of the ordinary is really what I find it's all about.
Yeah, you and me both. So, Deb, tell us a little bit about, your healing journey and kind of what led you to wanting to become a movement educator / movement coach.
Well, as a child, I didn't even really participate much in sports. I was that nerdy kid with the thick glasses at a certain point. And I got more and more sedentary and really didn't understand the pleasure of loving to move. There's this weird gap between being a preschooler who loved to move and run around barefoot and then becoming identified with being an academic where I didn't realize what I was missing out on. And then, when I was 19, I finally participated in my first sport. But in retrospect now, many, many years later, I find that some of my sedentary choices, like sitting in lotus pose, had actually damaged my hips, knees, and ankles. So of course I didn't want to move. Like, of course I avoided dance. I avoided running. I avoided having to walk very far. And yet but I was doing what the lady in the pink leotards on TV, Lilith in the 70s, doing, it seems so calm and healthy. And I was just copying her, not really understanding that there's also a right way to do things. I just was, that position, I'll just do that. She's doing that. This theme kept coming back over and over where I would do something actually trying to be healthy and having the exact opposite result to the finally in the last, in my 30s, I'm 56 now. In my 30s, I discovered that the world's best movers, my teacher Esther Goclay, my teacher Jean Couch, they pointed me to the fact they're all former yoga teachers who wrecked themselves. Once they finally realized that you need to focus on the world's best movers, if you want to restore yourself, those people are in remote villages in West Africa. They're in fishing ports in Portugal, still manually moving things around. They're toddlers who haven't been sitting in car seats and haven't been, and they're the greatest of all time athletes that were at the top of their game for decades, where other players were constantly getting injured. And so that started a long time ago. And yet still I would get things kind of off and trying to adapt it to my life as a sedentary person. I would go too far and like, I'm African. And I would do some weird copy shit like, like stick my bottom out and, try to live. I'm not going to use furniture. And then I made mistakes going to that extreme of like imitation. So what I've come full circle to is accepting fully our choices right now and learning how the body adapts. And learning our design is very fluid. We're a pressure system. We're liquid and air more than we are actually solid stuff. Even the bones are 20% water. And that you can change the shape of your bones. You can change the shape of your face and teeth. I could go on all day, but I'll share one last thing, which was, so then I had a child. I was an older mom, like 40. And I didn't know anything about having babies. There was no wisdom around me, no ancestral wisdom at all. I'm just working full time, having a child. And when he experienced all these troubles because of the impact of the birth and the cord being tangled, all these weird allergies, airway issues. And then he was my teacher. He was like, wow, you can undo. Well, first of all, if you avoid surgeons, my worst medical experience ever was a $350,000 bill when he was 2 months old for something that made him worse. Not only it didn't work, didn't solve the problem, and then it turns out I resolved much of the problem later just by changing what I ate as a breastfeeding mom. So
Yeah.
that the experts, the our emperor has no clothes, that they didn't really understand the digestive system, and they didn't understand when you get pressure around your neck. So the beautiful thing is that is if I'd have just accepted, oh, this is genetic, it's whatever, take this drug, I would have been dead in the water. So would he. He would have died several times. But what I learned instead is, well, I've been a design researcher for 25 years. I better figure out how this shit works. And so I learned how the digestive system works, which nerves go to the stomach, what happens when you have reflux, how the tongue and the lips have more pressure on the 300 times more pressure on the teeth when you swallow than braces could ever have. So just sort of how does all this interrelate until finally, even in the last, having dangerously unstable hips, I had to finally really learn the design of my hips to avoid, and my knee and my feet to avoid surgery over and over, to the point finally at 56, I can sprint an elite level. And I hated running until this year. Hated it my whole life. But when I learned that evolutionary biology wise, if you can sprint, that you can pretty much do almost anything a human needs to do. So I finally have really been putting the last pieces into my research about how do you do ordinary things with extraordinary attention so that you can be better than you ever thought.
That's amazing. And I want to get back to your sprinting, but I think the audience can probably relate to the unforeseen medical complications. They seem so common now, and they don't tell you up front. There's nobody advising you about the whole program. They just hit you with the bill because they did something. And and you even mentioned that's where we kind of tie into this whole notion of food as medicine. And doctors are totally clueless. I remember when in 2015, when I almost bled out from a sudden onset ulcer from medication that I was taking for pain, and was hospitalized. And the follow-up afterwards was more traumatic than the hospital visit because there was no aftercare for the ulcer. It was like, eat a bland diet. Yeah, thank you very much. That doesn't really help me very much, right? You give me a handout. Here are the bland things that you should eat forever so that you don't get another ulcer.
Wow,
And
yeah.
gastroenterologist, which up to that point I had a lot of respect for, I had a consult with him and I told him what I was doing to heal my own gut, which was this program called, wasn't Grow a New Body yet. It was Wild Fit. It was more like wasn't vegan, vegetarian, but it was an indigenous way of eating. And I told him I'm not eating grain anymore, no processed sugar. And he looked at me like I had three heads. It's like, I don't understand. But why don't you eat grain? Grain is good for you. I'm just like,
I feel similarly when I tell people I don't stretch.
yeah,
Animals don't stretch. They do one little thing in the morning and they're off. They don't sit around stubbornly forcing this muscle to do this. And animals don't work against their design. They're born the way they are. And they, a goat walks like a goat, a cat walks like a cat. And the thing about humans is we're super adapters. We're born before we're fully mature, so this giant brain can get through the birth canal. That means a lot of our operating system is outside of us. We by choosing our environment and choosing, and interacting with culture, that's feeding our operating system. So that's also the key to our and this super adaptability we have as these amorphous blobs. It can be a superpower. We can, invent these tools, do these amazing things that, no animals could ever do. But or it can become our absolute devolvement into suffering for decades and not feeling good because we've sat in a squishy couch and we adapted all the way to our environment. So then we don't have the resilience to be, independent and fully mobile users or
and
not users. Yeah.
Do you find, because you're closer to the research than I am, but a lot of the the tribal knowledge, if you will, around, how to exercise, how to move, how to stretch is based on outdated science. It's outdated concepts that the latest theories around, especially for elite athletes, which I know you look at that, and human performance is decades past this old notion of, oh, you got to stretch before you run. Oh, you got to do this. Oh,
Oh,
you got to do these
yeah,
kinds of
yeah. And
weightlifting.
it's funny because it's neither, it's too old, but it's also not old enough. You just need to
Right.
look at populations where instead of there being an 80% incident of back pain in our lifetime, there's an 80% likelihood in European and American, more American culture versus something like the Chiang Mai Hill tribes in Thailand have a 7%, 3% in some cultures in West Africa. Those are more from accidents. So these are two very separate things. You can have an impact, and then sometimes then you need, it can help to have impact the other way. Like, you have to immobilize, stabilize, but you also might need some chiropractic or craniosacral or something to account for that fall, that head injury, whatever. But even that is totally malleable. My craniosacral lady that I used to take my son to, she became a craniosacral therapist because she fell off a 2-story building and crushed her head, had all these horrible anger issues. And when craniosacral completely restored it, although Western medicine had told her she would always have these anger issues and would never be normal, she became totally normal. And it's a very gentle, what you're doing is just realigning the tissue so the fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, can pump so that the fluid can move. How we chew affects the cerebrospinal fluid. How we're sitting in a chair, it all affects each other. And so why I said that is it's neither old enough, which is if you just look at where things really are working, nor is it new enough. The newest science behind fascia and the nervous system and the fluid systems, they're figuring out that we are nonlinear, and that in fact a muscle can be tight from overstretching. A lot of people, some of these, and the problem here has been reductionist thinking. This even started in the 1300s, where the original anatomical bodies models were drawn off of corpses. That's why you see the body laying like that in a lot of the anatomy books. Is there's a body like that because they started drawing it from a dead body. They didn't build these models from living bodies.
That's right. Well, whole medical science started that way, and some of it has never advanced past that stage.
Well,
Hey,
and
we got a
have
comment
to.
from
Yeah, go
we got a
ahead.
comment from Laura. She says, and I know Laura, she's an occupational therapist. She says everybody's body is different. The path to health is not generic for all. Listening to one's own body and mind is key. I think
Absolutely.
we would all agree on that.
Now, there's
Mindful.
one variation on that. Of course, I mean, someone like me who was always hypermobile, I didn't know whatever diet, or I guess there's something to that being hypermobile. Like I could fold my wrist kind of down there. I just don't do it anymore. When you overstretch, you can't feel anymore that you overstretched. So we need both to listen to ourselves and have an external reference that is based on an indigenous ancestral goal. For example, if my goal is to be able to walk till I'm 120 years old, then I'm not going to do too much hip opening, because if I overstretch my hips, I can't walk forward as I'm designed. Nor will I sit with my tailbone tucked under me, because that's going to hurt my hips every time I go for a walk. So the thing right now is when people become addicted to something, like they pick a goal, like the goal is to be flexible. That's a terrible goal. The goal should be springy and mobile and resilient and regenerative and organically aligned. Only when I started studying with these elite sports people, I'm basically studying mostly the last couple of years with elite sports medicine people, because they have and doctors of physical therapy, and occupational therapy is actually one of the very best things that exists, one of the smartest fields that there is. They have a model of, let's get this person resilient. They aren't just like, oh, let's get him out of, I checked the box. Like, same thing with so stretching. First of all, none of our tissue at all is flat. There's not a single straight line in this thing. So why we are making all the stretching models based on a grid? Oh, I go like this, or I put my body on this flat surface. When we're trying to take these organic spiraling shapes and stick them in all these reductionist measures, then we lose kind of the integrity and the magic. And stretching, we mostly these muscles that wrap around the joints, movements that will really invigorate and invite whole body collaboration aren't going to be violating my design. So the thing is, if you go for this, you want to feel a stretch, you won't know when to stop. The goal is not to feel a stretch. The goal is to get your body in an organic alignment that you get better and better performance. And one thing I finally learned from I muscle test, based on two of my mentors are doctors in physical therapy. And we were basically checking whether anything made us better at breathing. Because if it improved the alignment of my rib cage and my pelvis, then the diaphragmatic pump would be pumping the lymph, the lungs would be moving, everything aligns around breath when you are in healthy organic alignment. And so I can measure if my arms can't move a certain way and my legs can't move a certain way, I've gotten off. So I've learned to have a North Star, which isn't solely how does it feel, if I've associated, oh, I want it to burn, I want it to feel hard. If I've associated those goals with falsely with longevity, so it's both. It's sensing, being mindful, and referencing in the long run, how do I want this whole thing to turn out?
Yeah, I like that because in my work, and we've been working with you, you've been working with me as a coach, and the whole mindful journey that I've been on for eating and learning to use food as medicine, I'm now applying to movement. And anytime I change my position from standing to sitting or laying to getting up or anything like that, I'm now doing it mindfully. I'm not throwing my legs around or trying to use a lever or any of that. I'm engaging my core, looking at how my feet are placed, all those types of things. And it's not, like you said, it's not always about how it feels, because when you start doing new things, it doesn't feel great anyway.
It'll feel, discomfort is good. Pain is the master. We respect the master, but we respect them not by running away. We step back just one bit and just listen. We listen around the pain, and pain might be in one vector. It's something we've done way too much, and we just do it a little differently. A tiny shift and an actual dialogue with the pain will open up a natural way of being that's going to be way more regenerative. And I wanted to add, I love that you brought up the everyday movement of, say, getting in and out of bed, getting in and out of a chair. This is another way, the reductionism of that, the purely rational way of thought and reducing things to components rather than integrated thought. This has been another consequence, is people separating, like, oh, this is my exercise. And this is movement. We're all moving right now. We're breathing. My head is moving. We're sitting in a chair. We had to move. In fact, the way we sit has more to do with the motion we made heading towards that chair. And it has to do with the decision we made when we bought that chair. It really isn't, when people try to correct sitting after they put their butt down, it's false, because they're separating out sitting from it being a movement that took you into that chair. So this idea that bringing mindfulness to the ordinary lets us get at the root cause of any weakness or instability or lack of capacity, as long as we look at the ancestral blueprints for how good could we feel, how they moved without the feeling there was a doctor to save them. They gave birth without thinking that anyone could help them, which means there's these ancestral cultures have a lot more wisdom, as long as we're intelligent about how we adapt. We adapt ourselves slowly, one snowflake at a time makes the avalanche. We aren't going for I'm a weekend warrior, I'm just going to make up for all that time I sat in the chair. Yes,
it
everyday
certainly doesn't
movements.
work that way. Well, and I find for me too, I mean, my biggest challenge is when I had chronic pain, I didn't really move very much for 12 years. And so because I'm on this journey, this spiritual journey and mindful journey, I realized, well, you need to go back to the basics, dude. You need to learn how to move first before you learn how to exercise and, quote unquote, get fit. And what I'm finding is it's really opening up new vistas of thought and possibility for the ways that I want to get fit, because it has to be in harmony with it. In the Indian cosmology, we say Aini, which incorporates the concepts of harmony and reciprocity.
Ah, I
So
love
it has
that.
to be Aini, the way you move and the way you exercise.
Yeah,
And it's just like, because when I was a kid, I worked out like a fiend and I had big muscles and I was fit, but I can tell you that I wasn't very mobile even then. And even though I looked good in the mirror in my own mind, I didn't move the way that, a normal human biomechanical uh, in harmony setup is meant to go.
right. And the thing we do most often is breathe.
Hmm.
On average, we breathe 22,000 times a day. What happens though is, like right now I'm a little stuffy, so I might breathe through my mouth. Well, that's going to change my whole architecture. Every breath is a wave of the ocean touching the shore, and it sculpts the shape of our bodies. And when people start to think that their belly being bloated is because they have a weak core, or because they need to do more sit-ups, or even need to eat differently, a lot of times a bloated belly is a breathing. And it puts pressure down on the hips. When we fully exhale, the deepest abdominal muscles turn on. My waist has gotten skinnier since I stopped exercising every day. All
Yeah.
I do a 30-second sprint.
Yep.
And the other thing, restful. How we rest, picking resting positions that nourish us. So, uh, ways to use the bed or the ground as a battery pack. So eventually it's the way that we rest that's going to be the battery that regenerates us. So that, and okay, I do West African dance. It's super vigorous a couple of times a week now. But for a while there, I was in December, I tore my hip horribly doing something I thought was healthy. Again, because I listened to someone else to that
It's a
point.
journey. That's right.
It's because, okay, I'd gotten so not taking my hips open. I'd gotten so not doing that. When a teacher asked me in a dance class to do it, I was like, I could probably do that. And I did it, and a loud popping sound, because this whole thing of knees wide, guys, it's
Yeah.
don't go, no, knees not wide, please, no.
So
There's this,
I want to
yeah.
take you back to the breath, because that's something that we share in the shamanic practice as well, and everything comes back to the breath. And I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about the role of uh, intentional breath in the movement work.
Yes, intentional breath. Yes. So at the highest level, I mean, we get back to where all of our breathing is nasal, in and out, all of it. And yet, I'm a little stuffy today. So I need to do something to open these. Like for one, if you can breathe through your nose for 2 minutes without with your mouth closed, pretty comfortably, then you're a candidate first to put a gentle adhesive tape on your mouth at night when you sleep. Even the person I learned this from, who's a glorious integrative holistic dentist, even she has no food allergies, nothing. She's got no problems. Even she does that at night. Now, of course, a CPAP machine is a different level. You'll have to use conscious breathing exercises to wean yourself off of that. So the first is that we just strive to nasal breathe as much as possible. Buteyko steps is, yes, yes, Christine. Buteyko steps is one way to do it, to open up the nasal passages. Because my son, his teeth were growing in on top of each other. His chin was receding way back. He was allergic to everything. He was down to white rice and lamb, and they just wanted to give him more drugs. And finally, I found someone who said, no, we're going to grow his airway. We're going to double the size of his airway. And even doing some tongue exercises, I closed my own teeth by accident doing like facelift exercises, like, and like, like, and then
Yeah.
my teeth closed for the first time when I'm 55. So
Yeah.
we're okay. So so one level is, if you can, gentle adhesive tape, next care, gentle adhesive tape when you're okay. The other is when we're resculpting. If we want to repressurize our body, and we want to take whatever heavy energy has flattened down, and we want to lift, organically recenter our pelvic floor and get this feeling of lift that our ancestors didn't have to think about. They already had this alignment because they squatted all the time, they walked all the time, they carried babies on their back, they didn't carry them in the front. So the second is a resculpting breath. I love to use this when I'm driving or doing anything else that's kind of boring. And one of the key things is the tongue. I didn't understand this the whole time. The tongue, it wants to be just barely suctioned up to the roof of the mouth. They say tongue to spot. What they mean is the whole tongue laying against the roof of your mouth without the tip of it pushing against your teeth. So kind of to get that little feeling, because this is a gasket. If an engine has a leaky gasket, there's no pressure in the engine, and the engine blows up or stops working. So if we repressurize and close this diaphragm, then the inhalation is going to be free. So the exhalation is where the work is, and it's down low. And then the inhale is this, because what happens is we get a little bloated, then we're using our neck, we're arching our back, and we have to do the inhale. Versus when we do the exhale, the inhale expands and repressurizes. So the resculpting exhale is open mouth, as though I'm checking whether I'm dead with a mirror, like fogging a mirror. As long as you can, as long as you can, gentle, no, because I used to do like Ujjayi show-off yoga. No, I'm almost dead. Angelic, and you go as far as you can with the exhale, and then close your lips. Tongue is back at the roof of the mouth. And I did that recently on a car road trip. Oh my God, I got out and I was just overjoyed. I mean, because it's about getting the time in, just like getting the reps, getting 5 to 8 breaths can totally reset your vagus nerve. And then over time, you'll start to get this abdominal tone that looks like you worked out, but it's way more functional. You can destroy physical integrity by doing too many sit-ups, because if this muscle gets short or this gets tight, then you have to tighten the ones in the back, tighter and tighter, versus the supple. What we want is lifelong suppleness, like the animals. Think of a cat. When you touch their flesh, it can move.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole other live stream just on the breath. There's so much to it, and there's so much misinformation about
Take a deep breath
what it
in.
does. Yeah,
I already have too much inhalation. My gut's already protruding. And then people always start with the inhale. No, take a deep breath out. And in fact, that's one of the main things I tell people, like, is there something you can just stop doing? Is there some activity you're doing out of compulsion that you can just stop? Can you add maybe just laying on your back with your knees over the couch? Can you just lay there and just get out of the compulsion mindset where we have to, like, we're trying to change, we're got to do it. Now, at the same time, the more that our system restores, the more we want to move. And then we should do delight. Let's do delight. Let's go enjoy and dance and hike. And let's chase joy.
awesome. I love it. Hey, I'm going to try an experiment here and bring everybody onto the stage. And you can unmute yourself if you want. Your camera on or off is up to you. And any comments or questions that you have for me or Deb, I'd love to hear them. Putting you on the spot a little, I realize. Hi, Gio. Oh, you're muted, buddy. Can't hear you.
Here we go. How about
Yep. There we
Yay.
go.
Yay. I was saying that I loved everything I heard so far, and the thing that I resonated the most with was what I heard when I first come on, and I came on, a little bit into the beginning, which was kind of the voice for natural movement. And for me, I'm about around you guys about same age and everything. So there's a uniqueness about that because. I don't know what your experience is, but for me, I've also, like Mark, you were saying how you worked out when you were younger and such. Same here. And as I've gotten older and I've had some movement restrictions at different points in time, I had a hip replacement about a year ago and had to rebuild that muscle and such. But the point I wanted to reflect back is the natural movement, and I'm finding myself now more and more drawn to that as the movement methodology. I'm also exploring different ways to bring movement in because it's so important for the actual mechanics of health recovery, particularly and regenerative health. So that movement is so important. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me that that the consistency of it is the most important thing. And so as I particularly recovered from hip surgery, I had to slowly get, step, little teeny steps back to it. And I'm still kind of there. I've been, looking in, I've been like, oh, I'm going to go back to the gym, blah, blah, blah. But I'm finding the natural movement is, it's built my muscles back. And also, like you said, the breath along with that. So I just wanted to give some voice to that. And like I said, I love everything I've heard so far.
That's amazing. Thanks for bringing that in. And yeah, one of the things that I've learned from Deb that was kind of an aha moment for me is initially I was thinking, okay, I'll learn this movement thing and I'll get some good habits going, and then I'll figure out like how to go to the gym, like you said.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding already is like my core, because I'm engaging my core intentionally all through the day now. And I feel like my stomach is stronger now than it has been in years. And my back pain is almost gone. My neck pain is gone because of the way I've been using my core and been sitting differently, right? So it's like, do that intentionally, do that daily, everyday movement intentionally, and worry about the other as a secondary kind of backup if you want to increase performance in a specific way. But this has been like a revelation for me. Is just like everyday movement is what you need to do.
And Mark, let's use the word core gets thrown around, and because we're a frontal oriented society, our pelvis started to get shoved forward. Only you can only photographically start finding that in the when flappers started, where they're jutting their pelvis forward and then the tail starts to tuck under. And this is only part of a rich culture where it's almost like we're showing off how rich we are, that we don't need our bodies to work. Our tail gets shoved under our belly. And so when the problem I see is when people think of core, they think of the core on the front of their body. When it's a core set, it's all around. And so the way you're working your core is that even when you're putting your hand down here, you're making this bridge between your hand and your foot. And when you're sitting in a chair, you're using the back of your body. You're like really reaching your tail back. So that's what I would, the physical therapists and occupational therapists and a lot of people really can successfully teach this when they have the time with you. And the problem is that a lot of the insurance limitations aren't letting people fully use movement as medicine. And so we need to, so finding our own way home is what we're all doing. And I'm really proud of your ability to keep going with the work and getting in and out of bed. That's a perfect way to prepare for falling. If we get in and out of bed like this, guess how you're going to fall? Like, but if you're using it as almost like a little Aikido roll, you can use the wall to. In fact, the last 4 or 5 years, I trained falling is actually even better than sprinting as the penultimate movement. One of my teachers got knocked off a motorcycle in Benin She had no helmet. She's a cute little Italian lady, string spaghetti strap, little teeny dress, little flip-flops on. And she was on a motorcycle that got hit by a car. She got flown like 30 feet, but she'd been training spiraling biomechanics for a long time. So we have pads here. They're sharp points, and then there are pads. The pads only work when you're in these spirals. And then she knew to recycle the energy of the fall with her head. She didn't let it. But this is, now we're talking about a 20-year practice. So why I'm saying all this is, but we could do a micro version of that right now at the wall. We could do a micro version of, wow, which parts are padded and which parts are sharp, as a way to just start preparing for living this long, glorious life in with freedom. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I think there's
Anybody else?
I was just going to say a certain part of it too, that is, like you said, like every day falling, and that falling movement or the getting up movement. That's the piece that I relate to in the natural movement, and that's kind of what I practice, because it is right. It's getting down, getting up, moving in the natural way that our body moves. And so I've just been, without a whole lot of, I worked with a physical therapist, for some time, but they had a very, kind of staccato way, not so much the natural way, but just repeating the movements or the falling. I love that about the falling, because I just took a fall on my bicycle about 2 weeks ago, and I did a pretty good job of landing. I have to say. I mean, I got a little injured, but I definitely used a combination of a little roll and breath, and then the pads like you're talking about. And I landed in an agave plant. I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and on the side of the road there was this agave plant, and that's what I landed into. But I was able to disperse the energy of it. So when I hit the agave, there was no momentum. It had all stopped.
Mm-hmm. That's
wow.
awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. And one leg, 40% of all walking is on one leg. So if we, and a lot of our joints get tugged when we're doing things with our weight on 2 feet, when we really need to have the weight more on one leg and the other foot more free. So even doing something like setting a timer for 1 minute and seeing everything you can do with the weight more on one leg, and can I turn? Can I bend? Can I shift forward and back? Because trying to do everything like we bend over like this, sagittal plane movement is the hardest. So, but if we turn things on angles and we have our weight more on one leg than the other, we're more likely to use a movement that is circular that'll help us manage the load. Like a wave, a ball rolling down a curvy path is like almost twice as fast as a ball rolling down a straight path, because the curves, we can recycle gravity. Gravity is free energy, and we can recycle it, but not if we have lost our connection to these diagonals and these curves, and these, how do we connect earth to sky with self-respect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that.
There is a component that's not being addressed here about falling. There is a technique to fall, but also individuals that had previous falls, fear factor comes in. When fear comes into falling, people's muscles automatically tighten, which makes the injury happen,
yes.
more likely to happen.
And so that's why we want snowflakes. We don't want an avalanche. We want that maybe that 2-inch conversation with your bed. We want just a tiny a whisper to the wall, like, and there's a way to do. There's a technique for everything, and gradual.
Oh yes, I'm a therapist, so I know the techniques.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, good.
I just wanted to add the component of fear with falling, because I think it's important that individuals learn how to fall, and there is a technique to learn how to fall, and also there's a component of fear that makes the injury because that's basically what you're fearing. You're fearing I'm going to get injured.
Right.
So if you twofold, so if you
Yeah.
learn how to fall, number one, and two, know how to protect yourself, so it's, preventative, then you're less likely to injure yourself because you have tools to prevent the injury.
How great would it be if we taught children how to fall?
Oh, children
like-
know how to fall. It's
I know, but
we
but
as
they
older
unlearn it.
adults that don't know how to fall.
Yeah. But they unlearn it
We-
when they get all this bad information about how to exercise and how to do sports wrong. And, all the movement things that we learn in our lifetime kind of sets us up as adults, older adults especially, to fall wrong.
And I think the component of falling is lost with age. Kids are lower to the ground. Kids are, their spirits are freer. Their movements are freer. There's a lot of reasons why kids can fall better than older adults.
My teacher was 63 when she 2 years ago when she got knocked off that motorcycle, but she made a lifetime of studying movement. So
yes,
she's a child. She's that's one reason I chose to go to Europe to study with them. They're all in their 60s, move better than toddlers. And that's the person who I helped co-create some of this work with is like, well, what is it? A lot of it, like you're both saying, there's a lot of unlearning and then there is relearning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are people like the example that you gave, that woman that you gave as example, she has free flowing movement.
Oh gosh, she's amazing. Yeah. And
yeah.
yet she hasn't always had it. Just no, she started studying this realm 20 years ago. And I never really was that free flowing of a mover. And I would think I was free flowing until I really studied the architecture of the bones and the architecture of the wrapping. Like, I should have had knee surgery by now. I should have had 2 hip replacements by now. I broke them. I haven't been to a doctor in 17 years. I just refuse. There's got to be a better way than surgery. But I have the luxury that that's why I chose this education, to educate people about this, because the insurance system doesn't set you up to learn about your own body. In fact, why, like, and even in ancient Chinese medicine, acupuncture was considered invasive. First, you would go to someone who helps you make sure the bones are in place. The bone setter is kind of like a chiropractor. And then you go to acupuncture as invasive. So why it's cheaper to get surgery than for me to spend a year going every week to a physical therapist or go to some movement restoration, so it's an economic upside down issue as well. So that's why we're helping each other.
I love it. Hey, so I love the engagement. This is amazing. We could probably continue this conversation for several hours, but tell the people how they can get a hold of you if they want to work with you, Deb, or learn more.
My website is movingasdesigned.com. And there I have a couple links to some free videos and stuff. And I work with people mostly on, I've now edited down to the movement that we work on has to make you better at walking, breathing, and then eventually running. Because that's an expression of ultimate, like pain-free sprinting is an expression of ultimate health. So movingasdesigned.com. And I have a podcast too called The Architecture of Health about my son's healing journey.
I'll make sure those links are in the Shaman Circle so everybody can get them. And if you're in the Shaman Circle, you already know how to get a hold of me. If you're not, that's step one. Come into the Shaman Circle, and we'll have a dialogue about some of these techniques, working with Deb, working with me, how to correct, in some cases, a lifetime of bad habits with mindful movement was the topic today. And we also have some things coming up on breathing and ecotherapy, so stay tuned.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mark.
everybody, for
Thanks,
coming.
everyone. Lovely
Thank you.
insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Dondi.